Neon Genesis Evangelion is a 1995 anime released with much cryptic and allegorical air surrounding the show, having one of the most open-ended and metaphorical endings of anything ever, leading to 5 subsequential movies that might have actually left more questions than answers. Regardless, from what it may seem, it is not such a confusing or convoluted mess, but rather a well-written and artistically orchestrated staple in both anime and general media. One of the biggest aspects that stick out about Neon Genesis Evangelion is all the religious imagery. From crosses, the angels, Lance of Longinus, even the title, there is a multitude of references to Christianity that we actually won't be talking about because apparently it means nothing. There's a multitude of religious iconography that the creator dismisses as having no meaning, which personally I disagree with, since there's actually a great deal of effort that was put into the religious subtext of the show. Of course, that is neither here nor there. What we will be talking about is the copious amount of psychology that is in Evangelion, more specifically the Freudian implications and identity of self in Neon Genesis Evangelion and how it holds true. In the show, we followed 3 protagonists, that being Shinji, Asuka, and Rei, as displayed with these Funko Pops. They are all similar in the sense that they do not have any reliable parental figures in their lives and have selectively been chosen to pilot these mecha robots called Eva units, which are used to fight the aliens attacking Tokyo 3, called Angels. Referencing to the works of Sigmund Freud, he based his psychology in psychoanalysis, which asserts the human psyche is broken into 2 main components, the conscious and the unconscious. He proposes that the brain can often use methods to keep our brain in the unconscious, repressing negative memories and emotions, and more importantly, unresolved trauma. Our most followed protagonist here, Shinji, is the most complicated with their development and behavior. An overarching theme we see with Shinji is Erikson's 5th stage development, identity versus role confusion. The idea here is that the stage is the adolescence finding interpersonal relationships, as well as finding a sense of identity in occupation, sex roles, and personality, as well as resolving that identity and direction. This is something our protagonist Shinji is dealing with throughout the entire show, as he never has anyone to consistently be intimate with, as well as never finding or at least being comfortable with his purpose. He wants to get closer with his father, but all he knows is that he must pilot the Eva unit, which he utterly dreads. Fortunately, we get a resolution with this in the last 2 episodes, which takes entirely within Shinji's mind, as he comes to terms with self-loathing and how much it distorts his perception of reality. Finally, he realizes that he has value as an individual and accepts his own will and that he needs other people after all. There's also Freud's psychosexual theory, which he believes every action stems from some sort of desire for pleasure. This plays huge with the theme of the Oedipus complex, which is rather baseless and not a well-supported theory with modern and contemporary times, but nonetheless is a very apparent in Evangelion since it was made in the 90s. Shinji's father left him after his mother died to pursue the creation of the Eva units. The one that Shinji pilots just so happens to have the soul of his mother. His co-pilot, Rei, is also just a test tube clone of Shinji, but that's not something we find out until much later on. But Rei and Shinji's father have a connection that Shinji is very jealous of, as he wants to get closer with Rei, not knowing that Rei is actually his mother. Eventually, he indirectly kills his father, fulfilling the Oedipus complex. Freud also believed that the personality is in 3 parts: the id, ego, and superego. Id is the first part of the personality, which is our basic and primal desires. The ego is the rational part of our personality, meant to contain the id and act rationally. The superego incorporates the social rules of our culture and assigns our values for our behavior to follow. These can actually be assigned to each one of our pilots, Asuka being the id, sexually driven and having a lot of trauma. Rei being the superego, These can each be assigned to one of our pilots. Asuka being the id, since she is filled with sexual desire, is desire-driven, and has lots of trauma. Rei being the superego, having lots of morals, perfection-driven, and very realistic. Shinji would be the ego, as he is a balance and mediator between the both. The last and most obvious illusion involves the hedgehog's dilemma. This is my favorite concept touched upon in the show, as it is something that Freud also took great interest in from Schopenhauer. This is actually directly referenced in the third episode and is actually the title of the fourth, where Shinji's new caretaker, Misato Katsuragi, is unsure of Shinji's antisocial behavior. Her scientist peer, Ritsuko, suggests the dilemma, saying that Shinji might be scared of taking risks for intimacy as he fears being hurt again. Shinji actually ends up running away from the responsibility to pilot an Eva unit, and Misato goes after him, ending up in development for both Misato and Shinji, realizing they have both made an effort to overcome their tendency to hurt or withdraw in order to benefit from the warmth that comes from connection. In conclusion, Evangelion is a thoroughly fleshed out anime with numerous references and influences from both psychology and philosophy. The ones that I talked about today were really just a few of the many that are touched upon in the show. But it just goes to show that ideas and concepts in psychology graces all walks of media and life, with Neon Genesis Evangelion being no exception, as Evangelion will lead on to being one of the most influential and important animes of all time.